Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Denise Mausrell, a professor in the Woodrow Wilson School and the Civil Environmental Engineering Department. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Gina McCarthy to Princeton, to the Woodrow Wilson School today. As an aside, I just want to say that right after I got my master's degree, I worked for EPA in Washington, D.C., and I was always absolutely super excited to run into the administrator in the elevator, and I would try and think of something interesting to say as we went up the five floors. And so I'm extremely excited to be able to talk to you for more than a minute today. Gina McCarthy was the administrator for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under President Barack Obama, and today she'll discuss the future of EPA and our planet. A career public servant, McCarthy has been a champion for strategies to protect public health and the environment for 37 years. She's been in public service. During her tenure as the head of EPA, she spearheaded initiatives to advance the Obama administration's public health and environmental protection goals to cut air pollution, protect water resources, reduce greenhouse gases, and strengthen chemical safety to better protect Americans, especially the most vulnerable, from negative health impacts. Under McCarthy, in 2015, the EPA developed the Clean Power Plan, which set the first ever national standards for reducing carbon dioxide emissions from existing power plants, underscoring the country's commitment then to domestic action on climate and spurring international efforts that help secure the Paris Climate Agreement. Scott Pruitt, President Trump's EPA administrator, unfortunately signed a measure yesterday to repeal the Clean Power Plan, President Obama's signature policy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Fortunately, as Gina McCarthy was telling my class just an hour ago, it's extremely likely that that attempt to roll back the Clean Power Plan will be held up in the courts. So we still have checks and balances in our government. However, our current president, Donald Trump, as you know, also recently withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Agreement. Gina McCarthy today will discuss how we can move forward on climate protection despite the positions of the current administration. Since the change in administration and her departure from EPA, McCarthy has been a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government's Institute of Politics and was a Menschel Senior Leadership Fellow at the Harvard School of Public Health. Please join me in welcoming her.
Hi, everybody. Oh, God, it's the end of the day, is it? Come on, let's wake up. This is going to be exciting, at least for me. I don't know about you. Who cares, though? It's all about me. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for inviting me to Princeton and Woodrow Wilson. I appreciate it. Thank you for all of the work to get me here. I have realized that one of my skill sets is not scheduling. Now that I don't have schedulers, I stink at it. So I end up being double booked many times. So I really thank you for letting me come today. It's going to be fun, and it's been interesting. It's been been a race today to get to everything, and it's been fun. And it's so wonderful to spend time with the students. So my goal today is to give you a little bit of a chit chat on what I see happening, and then hopefully we'll have lots of times for questions and answers, because the one thing I've realized today is that you have lots of questions, which is good. I have very few answers, which is not good, but maybe you can help with that, and we'll have some group think here. But let me just begin by saying that I do recognize, and I certainly feel it, that we are living in incredibly uncertain times. And I don't think that's just about the environment today. I think we all worry about where the United States is heading and about the stability of this country in the international arena. And I know I worry about EPA and its continued ability to move forward after 47 years of existence, delivering on promises of clean drinking water and clean air and land that you can live on and places that your kids can play, that we can feel comfortable that they're going to be healthy. And I worry about all the accomplishments of the past 8 years, because I think there were many. under the Obama administration that took meaningful action to continue with that progress of protecting natural resources, as well as protecting our ability to continue to live in this world successfully because of actions we're taking on climate change, which I see as one of the biggest and most important existential challenges of our time. And so it feels like a little bit that all of this is up in the air, and I think we have to talk about that. I worry not just about the fate of EPA and science, but I worry about the fate of our democracy, frankly. And I worry about the stability of our planet moving forward. And so we do have to face those challenges. But really, other than all of those things I worry about, I think this administration is doing a hell of a job. Just wanted to make that clear. I don't know what else is left that they're doing a hell of a good job on, but it's a very difficult time. And so we have to walk through this. But my mother always told me that nobody wants to hang around with a grumpy Gus. Now, the first thing is, what is a grumpy Gus? I think I've constituted one for the past 3 minutes. And so in case you're worried about what that means. So I am going to try to do my best to get through the things that concern me. But frankly, I am not going to leave you in the dust, because every morning I wake up and for 5 minutes I don't function as well as I used to, because my husband is upstairs screaming at MSNBC. And I tell him, no wonder why I lived in Washington and you lived in Boston. But as soon as I can get him to calm down and turn the TV off, you go back to reality, folks. So we can be upset about what's going on in Washington and have disagreements with what's happening, but we have to maintain a tremendous sense of hope. We have to move forward. We have to slap ourselves upside the head, which I do every morning, and say, yeah, things are not going the way that I had hoped, but this is the United States of America, and it works for its people. That's who runs it, and we are going to have a voice to speak, and I am not going to be a grumpy Gus all day long. I have to say the other reason is not just because my mother told me not to be a grumpy Gus, but because every time I see people on the street, and people do recognize you after you've been around a while, I find that they actually cross the street so they don't have to come up and say they're really sorry. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. This is actually what they do. They come up to me and they go, Gina, how are you? I'm like, oh my God, I'm fine. What's the matter with you? You know, life isn't that bad. I'm just walking around the pond here. Give me a break. So we have to sort of get out of the doldrums that we're in. And one of the best ways to do it is to actually hang out with students, which is why I am here. You know, the first thing I did when I left was to hang out at Harvard, and they're actually, frankly, much smarter. Oh, no, I'm only kidding. It's just students everywhere give you that sense of hope. Not because they agree with politics, but because they agree with living in a sense of life, a hopefulness that we all have to sort of cling to in times when it's difficult. And I find this generation to be incredibly amazing. I have to say, you're just so smart. And I said smart with an R. Did you like that? I'm getting better at this. I really want to say smart. You're so smart. You're focused. You are well-read. You are aware of what's happening in the world. You are ambitious. And the thing I like the best is you continue to have an incredibly strong sense of social justice. And I think it's the sense that I haven't seen for a very long time. And it is probably because with information so available to you, it's hard not to see the injustice of the world and want to do something about it. So I know that at this point in time, things are difficult, but really, if I had to leave it all in your hands, I'd be very comfortable with that. Because I think you have the right sensibilities and you have the right education and training to make things happen. So I do not want you to think that you're ceding any of your future to anybody else. You are grabbing it yourselves. And it's our job, mine in particular, at this stage in my life, to make sure that you understand that you are in control of your future if you don't cede it to somebody else. And so we have to work together, because at this point in time, the partisanship that I am seeing is unlike anything that I have ever seen before. You know, it is in this country splitting us up, not just Republicans and Democrats, but we see the divisions going well beyond red and blue states. It's rural and urban America right now. It's coastal states in the Midwest. It's the North from the South. Still, we are segregated. It's Red Sox Nation from Yankees. I like that one. Shall we all always and forever be separated, is my sense on that. You know, the checks and balances that we have put in place in the three branches of government is really what we have to rely on to actually help make sure that the democracy we have isn't so sorely tested with the partisanship we have today. And we have to have an ability to test actions that are being done by the federal level, both in Congress, by the courts as well. And the system we have in place, I think, will survive. I think our democracy will end up being stronger, but it will in no way, at this point, have to be quiet or not be tested. It will be thoroughly tested. And so we know, at least I know, that having been living in this country for the past 63 years, that the reason EPA was created and the reason why government was created was to protect our common goods. It wasn't to take away individuals' freedoms. It was actually to protect the freedom of individuals by protecting our common good. And the thing that I know for sure, after living through the 60s and 70s, is part of our core values was to deliver clean water and clean air. It was to make sure that we were investing in people's common needs to have their public health protected and to have a strong environment that actually thrust us forward into a better economic future. This is why EPA was created. And those values continue to be our common values. And the one thing that you need to understand, and that everybody needs to understand, is that despite the fact that we are called the Environmental Protection Agency, the Environmental Protection Agency is a public health agency. Our measure of success is whether we save people's lives and we reduce morbidity and mortality. That's what our job is. Now, I love birds and bunnies and polar bears. They're just not my problem, folks, except in a larger context. We need to remember that when someone's coming up and wondering why there is an Environmental Protection Agency. We're here to protect your health, your well-being, as well as the future of our kids. And that mission has never been owned by any one party. It was actually Teddy Roosevelt that started the National Park System. It was Richard Nixon that started the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, I didn't value everything he did. That was a good one. And it was actually George H. Bush that actually started and was the champion of the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990, which is perhaps one of the most significant public health laws in this country or anywhere. It is the law that we are using to regulate carbon emissions today. And so we have to recognize that everybody wants clean air. Nobody can run on a platform of dirty air. Maybe they could. It wouldn't be a good one. You wouldn't have a lot of people following you. And nobody certainly wants to live near a Superfund site or at industries where you've deregulated them and they can spew whatever black smoke and pollutants they want into the air. And absolutely no one could look forward to a future with more intense and frequent hurricanes or wildfires or droughts that we are seeing today that is not just taking away lives and taking away property, but is also sort of diminishing a sense of safety and stability in this country, as well as creating huge off-budget deficits that all of us will have to deal with. So today things are in flux, but frankly, I don't think that we are going to see permanent damage in our ability to be able to protect ourselves and our children, not if we work together. Now, this administration is absolutely looking at rolling back virtually every standard that has been put in place over the last 8 years. Don't think it's just about not doing climate. This is about rolling back clean air protections, clean water protections. It's about diminishing our ability to clean up Superfund sites. It's diminishing our ability to actually collect the money from the responsible parties. So the polluter pays principle is being challenged. The president's budget right now, the president's budget was proposing to cut EPA by 35%, to cut federal funding to states for environmental work by 45%. It was suggesting that EPA needs to go back to levels of personnel and staffing, to levels that are so low that we barely saw them in the beginning of the 80s. That's the levels that we are at. And I know they're already looking at shutting down laboratories, closing regional offices. You know, when you have an agency that, as one of its almost first acts, take all of the climate science off of the web page, you know you're in a little bit of trouble. Our climate science page isn't under development. It is under wraps. And that we can never tolerate. They even took the word science out of the mission of our Office of Science and Technology. What does it do? Think big widget thoughts or something? I don't know what they think we do. It would be funny if it weren't true, right? But they also, the president also told all of the agencies across the US government to make sure that they don't consider climate change when they look at environmental impact assessments of projects that are moving through. And when you spend federal infrastructure dollars, you're not supposed to consider climate change. Now, I have never seen, and engineers, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, I have never seen a wastewater treatment facility that worked very well when it was underwater. And we are seeing them today underwater. Why would we ever build another one like that? There is no longer a climate adaptation office in EPA. It was a 10-person agency whose sole responsibility it was to spread news across the cities and towns about what you needed to do to protect your community, to build resilience in a changing climate. And we have a communications person who is now in charge of making final science decisions for the agency. The sole criteria for that person is that they spent some time working in the Republican National Committee. That is a scary situation. And I could go on because it's not just the administration as a whole. It is about Congress as well, trying to impose science and, in fact, making science determinations through law, which I don't think has ever happened before. And so we are in, I guess, I would say a really difficult position right now. Because we, as Denise also mentioned, the agency has taken some specific actions to eliminate climate efforts moving forward. But perhaps the most embarrassing one is the announcement to get out of the Paris Agreement. The reason it's embarrassing is that we led the charge for the Paris Agreement to happen. President Obama staked the reputation of the United States on the line when he really literally worked with every state in the world, every country, to sign on to that agreement. And the decision that was made was contrary not just to the science, it was contrary to the wishes of the business community as a whole in the United States. It was contrary to this country's economic and national security interests, not that I said, but our economic interests by the economists telling us, and our national security interests by the Joint Chiefs of Staff telling us about the threat that climate change poses to national interests. But the weird thing is for a president that wants to make deals, how does one make a deal with someone that changes their mind like that and pulls us out? It is embarrassing at this point for me to spend time with colleagues in other countries and have to explain this to them. But I will tell you, I said I wasn't going to be a grumpy Gus, and I called that a little too soon, so I apologize for that. But that's as much doom and gloom as I am going to give you, because it's gloomy enough, honestly. But I want to tell you that almost everything I just said to you is not actually resulting in final decisions that are being made that are going to be contrary to science and the law. Because pronouncements don't change things. If you want to get rid of and roll back all of the rules that we put into place at EPA over the past 8 years, guess what you have to do? It takes a rule to undo a rule. I'm going to tell you something you may not know. Rules are incredibly, wickedly hard to do. It requires teamwork. It requires career staff who know the law, that understand the decisions that have been made in the courts over time. It requires science to be paid attention to. It requires the law to be followed. It requires facts to be gathered. It requires everybody to work together to think big thoughts and apply them in little ways. There is no way that this administration has done anything close to that amount of work that tells me that they are going to be successful in rolling back any rule that the prior administration put into place. Because we followed the science, we followed the law, we gathered the facts, and we did outreach to anybody who had anything to do with anything or wanted to, and we took comment from them, and we considered it, and we used the democratic process to come to a decision. That's what we did. Three times this administration has tried to shortcut the public process for decision-making in the agency. And each of 3 times they've been challenged in court, and they were summarily dismissed as being illegal because they didn't follow the public process. So now they are. Now they are. Now they are actually proposing rules. So when someone tells you that the Clean Power Plan got repealed, tell them, no, it didn't. Practice, no, it didn't. New Jersey Act, no, maybe it isn't. What they did was actually write something that was 43 pages long with 11 pages of legal justification to say that the Clean Power Plan should go away. Now, what the courts told them to do is to be very careful, because they're not questioning the science. That's been decided. It went to the Supreme Court 3 times. The Supreme Court said the climate science is just fine. It's robust. If EPA makes a determination that it endangers health in that sector, then you got to regulate it. The courts have told this administration, be careful. You have to move forward, not just backwards, because you're obligated by law to regulate greenhouse gases in this sector, unless you challenge the science and change everything else, which they can't do. And instead, they put a repeal out that not only didn't move forward, but it said, maybe I'll ask questions about what we should do in the future, and one of those questions is going to be, should we do anything? They just stuck the biggest finger in the eye of one of the biggest, most powerful courts in this country, because the court is not going to tolerate continued delay on a mandatory duty, which is what this amounts to. And so I don't even think that we have to worry about whether or not they got this right. I can tell you on its face they didn't follow the law. They didn't respect the mandatory duties that EPA has been imposed on it by Congress, and they are going to have one hell of a time trying to defend this in the courts. And in fact, they may have made a step that not only allows us at this point to get the DC Circuit to make a decision on what's already been briefed to them, but also question the Supreme Court's stay on the Clean Power Plan. So you can get depressed about what happened yesterday, but it was a misstep. It represents a complete backwards movement of that agency. It represents a position that the courts, I don't think, can tolerate. So they could have done it more, they could have done it differently, but apparently in 43 pages they couldn't figure out how. And I think it's because they don't work with the career staff. I think it's because they sat in their offices and didn't find out how to do the job right. Because listen, folks, every administration has the right to have different policies. This administration had a right to rethink the Clean Power Plan if they thought we got something wrong. But they haven't yet articulated anything fundamental with any of the rules that EPA did, other than on the clean water rule, they decided to challenge that because the president told them to in an executive order. That's not going to cut the mustard, because every time you have a change in administration, the United States government cannot change its mind. You need to have a reason to do a rule that gets rid of another rule. It has to be fundamentally flawed. Or think about what life would be. You'd be bouncing back and forth. The uncertainty in the business community is ridiculous today. It is not productive for the businesses to be dealing with the uncertainty of today. And it's not productive for our economy to continue with this level of uncertainty. And I think the thing we have to remind people of is that while pollution isn't as visible as it was before, that it's still essential for an EPA to have rules of the road here. You need to have a level playing field for businesses. You still need to have rules that say you can't pollute people. You can't roll these back or undermine the very fabric of rulemaking and think that the United States of America is going to tolerate it. We have 123 million people who are living in areas in this country that do not have air that meets air quality standards, health-based standards. We have 130 million people relying on the clean water rule to go forward, who rely on rivers and streams that today are not protected without that rule. We have 55% of the rivers and stream miles in this country that don't have vibrant ecosystems because there is too much pollution, nitrate pollution and phosphorus that is mucking up the system. So just because you can't see pollution doesn't mean we don't have challenges. So if we just stop thinking about what this administration is doing and remind ourselves about our job that we have to move forward, we will do just fine. Because today is not a time to despair. It is a time to get active and activated. We will not throw in the towel, sit on the couch, and watch 7 years of episodes of Game of Thrones. I did that last week. It was fun. Come on, turn off Netflix and get busy, folks. The one thing you have to realize is that when I was a kid, things looked horrible. You don't want to go back there. You got to go forward. So stop thinking that the federal government rules the roost when it comes to environmental protection. Because in this country, nothing happened at the federal level until it was years of struggle at the grassroots level, at the city and state level. That's what's happening today. When this administration is asleep, what we see is cities and states are kicking butt. Businesses are stepping up. They're saying, we don't care what the federal government does. We know what the future looks like, and we're going to invest in it. Because of social media, you can tell what businesses are investing. You can tell what they do. All of your little eyes and little fingers can tell on everybody. Right? You know that it makes a difference. Transparency is everything. That's the most important thing. So pay attention. Speak your mind. If you agree with this president, stand up. And then let's talk about our common values and how to get there. If you disagree with him, stand up. And let's talk about our common values and how to get there. We cannot allow this to divide us, to destroy our democracy. This is not a time of bickering back and forth. This is a time for people who care about democracy to stand up and work together for a change instead of apart. Now listen, you might think that all hell will freeze over if we lose the Clean Power Plan. Will I be pissed off? Absolutely. Make no mistake about it, I'll mope for at least a minute and a half. But the challenge is that it's not going to change the clean energy revolution in this country. That train's left the station. It is not going back. Because right now, clean energy is cheaper than going to fossil fuel. It is the choice of the market. No matter what any one person, including the president, says, we are heading to a clean energy future, and that's going to continue. The one may be that as we've gotten so good at this, and as we're moving forward, the challenge we have is we're going to get to those early reductions we need to get on climate, but we may be ceding the long-term investment that would keep us strong in terms of inventing the technologies of the future that we need to get to zero, that we need to get to the level that science dictates. Because of the Paris Agreement and because of the failure of this administration to continue to fund science and technology and innovation, we could be ceding the strength of the United States and trading that off to other countries to provide that leadership. Shame on the United States of America. Shame on us. That we can't let happen. So, the clean energy train has left the station. It is at a remarkable pace. I just can't believe it. We have, for the first time over the last 3 years, global emissions of carbon have gone down while the economy has increased, hugely decoupling the two. So don't tell me that we can't address climate change. And for crying out loud, don't tell me it's too late to try. If you do either of those, I'm kicking you out of here. All right, so we can do this, and we know that things are moving forward. And what's most interesting to me today is that one of the greatest things that's happened is I think we're on the cusp not just of clean energy in the energy sector, but I think we're on the cusp of clean energy in the transportation sector. And if we do both, we will be on a winning strategy. Let me tell you why I think that is. Now, do you remember when the Obama administration first came in 2008 and 9, that you had all of the major automakers going bankrupt and the federal government was bailing them out? There was a big controversy about that. Some people thought it was terrible of the administration to bail them out. But what they may not have understood is they paid a price for it. They not only paid all the money back, but they paid a price in agreeing to work with us to actually make cars that people would buy. Because the problem with the car makers is they were producing highly inefficient cars and people were turning to foreign makers to actually buy their cars. And that changed because this administration sat them down and we designed rules that would make them produce energy efficient cars and cleaner cars, lower greenhouse gas emissions. And as a result, there's been a transformation in that sector. They have grown jobs, more manufacturing. They are selling more cars than ever before. Now, the challenge that we face is that as soon as this administration came in, the car industry did exactly whatever every other industry group has done since time immemorial. They send in their lobbying wing, and they go into the administration and say, I really hate all these rules, can you get rid of them? But generally, you get a pat on the back, on your head, and you say, thank you very much for your input. That's what you get. This time it was different. This president embraced the idea and said, let's rethink way more than you even asked for. Now, all of a sudden, they're in an interesting position of needing 11 years lead time to figure out what models they need to produce, and they're in uncertainty today. So they're like, oh, who knew he would ever do this? Right? It's like a kid eating a birthday cake. You ask, can you eat the whole cake when it's your birthday? And your mother says yes, and you get sick. You should have just had only that one slice, right? That's where they are today. And the interesting thing is that the world of transportation is changing anyways. So while they may be uncertain, what's happened is a couple of things. Tesla now has higher asset value than General Motors. Higher asset value than Ford. Tesla does. And right now, what we see is that the European Union, as part of their climate effort, has decided that they are going to ban the internal combustion engine. And guess what? China's decided the same thing. You know why China's doing it? Because they own one of the biggest electric vehicle car manufacturers called BYD. And they have been investing in battery technology that's going to actually give them a leg up on the rest of the world in terms of selling those cars. And they're coming to the United States of America to sell vehicles. Now, all of a sudden, you have the General Motors CEO flying to China 3 weeks ago saying, you know, I heard about that banning of the internal combustion engines, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think you ought to slow it down. Well, you know, I think what really happened is that she came back and realized that it didn't go as well as she had hoped. So 2 weeks ago, General Motors said, you know, we think we're going to stop making the internal combustion engines. We haven't decided when, but we think. Because there is a transition afoot. They are not going to stop the advance of electric vehicles. I'm tired of people saying you can't make them. They exist. They are marketable. They are going to be the wave of the future. And like it or not, they're likely to be autonomous. And if you ever drove with me, you would think that was a step up. So folks, you need to understand that the world is changing here in dramatic ways. So stop worrying about what regulations are doing and look at the markets. For the first time ever, as the environmental administrator, I can be excited about saying, it's the economy, stupid, right? And so the only thing we need to do is to continue to speak clearly to people about the challenges we're facing, because I think we can make things work no matter what is happening in Washington. States and cities do as well, because we serve everybody, not just people who voted for us. We serve America and every person in it. That's who I took an oath to serve. That's who I am going to serve. And I think one of the things I wanted to tell you about you as scientists is that I really would hope after you leave here not to talk science talk, not to talk gobbledygook. It's a very technical term. I'm over at the Harvard School of Public Health because the scientists there are great people. But the way in which we talk about climate science drives me to drink. It's not far, but it drives me to drink. Basically, when a climate scientist, because we have to get this right, folks, when a climate scientist says, or the IPCC, they say it's very, very probable or likely that anthropogenic emissions are a significant contribution to climate change. And I'm like, holy crap. Can you speak English? Right? That's science speak. But you know, when people hear that in the real world, they think, oh my God, they really don't know. They're guessing. Like it's a flip of a coin. Oh, very likely today, maybe not tomorrow. And then scientists always follow it up by saying, yes, but the science is always evolving. Well, you know what that says?
It says, let's put it off for 20 or 30 more years, and then we'll see how that settles. And so I tell them, here is your message. It's very clear, and use this as an example in everything you do. You need to say, climate change is real, man-made emissions are causing it, which is why women need to rule the world. That's the message. So folks, let's do everything we can today to think about this as a moment of opportunity for us. You can lead. You can determine your own future. You can create the innovations that are going to pay off for the United States tomorrow. This is an opportunity for us to be smart, to think about equity and social justice, to realize that we have to take systems approaches to complex problems. You are learning this. It is time to put that learning to action. It is time to return to what people need to protect their health and their safety, not worry about who's getting elected or what party they're from. That's transitory. That is not permanent. What we do for the United States of America is permanent. That's what we have to do, because a clean, healthy environment is not a luxury. It is a human right. It needs to be delivered no matter who is in Washington. And we can do this. We did follow the law in science, and it will prevail. That's what we do in the United States. We might lose for a momentary, but we are going to win in the long term because we're doing what's right, and we're doing it the right way. That's what you have to remember. So continue to work at the grassroots level. Congratulate cities and states that are doing the right thing. Give them a shout out and let them know that you're paying attention. And when you can, comment on work that's going on at the federal level that you disagree with, and comment on the ones you agree with. Moderate people's behavior, because we have to appeal to everybody in this country, because everybody deserves to have their voices heard. And remember, when the United States in Washington is asleep, that's when we have to wake up, guys. That's when it's our world. Today it's it. We can make it happen. Thanks very much. Okay. All right, I started out as a grumpy Gus. I'm not anymore, right? We're not grumpy Gusses anymore? Let's go, let's do it.
Thank you for that inspiring call to action. We have our
Okay.
marching orders. If you have questions, please come down to the mic, and we'll take student questions first, since this is a university. So please, students, if you have fire in your belly after that talk, or even if you feel that what you said is completely wrong, please come down and ask a question.
So first off, thanks for your service over the last several years with President Obama. And so one of the rules that the EPA came forward with that I think was didn't meet as much acclaim was the renewable energy certificate. And that was one of my favorites because it gave individual citizens the power to make choices, not an overarching public policy. Do you think that that has a future, or that that will come under attack? And also, how much more effective do you think the program will become if it stays in place without repeal?
I actually think it's going to be fine. They're attacking much more high-level things and understanding how to implement and how to get people activated. You know, I don't, you know, right now there's a bunch of efforts going on both at EPA and Energy to try to figure out how to do things, they're trying to figure out how to really give support to the coal industry as a whole, by basically trying to ensure that coal facilities that otherwise would be closed because they're not marketable get run for reliability purposes. That's one thing. So they're trying to give money there. And on the other case, they're trying to slow down renewables in the market. They're talking about surcharges or tariffs on solar equipment that comes in from outside. And they're looking at obviously shifting regulatory requirements that EPA put in place during the Obama administration. So there's a lot of things going on at the high level, but honestly, what you're talking about is not the level of of work that I see them pursuing. It is much higher level. That's a check the box. I did that, but is not likely to have the same level of impact of the programs that you're talking about.
Okay,
So I think we're good. Unless you just told everybody what to do. Yes.
Hi, my name is Vishan. I'm an economics major, and I asked this because, I mean, we are a research university, but I think a common critique of research universities like this is that, I guess, like, academics have problems connecting their own research, whether it's on the economic side or the science side, like hard science side, into practice, and they have problems communicating directly with the EPA and with policymakers. So I was wondering if you can share your thoughts on areas in which academics can improve their communication with the EPA and in policy, and if you have any examples of situations where you actually have used academic research, perhaps produced outside the EPA itself, to make policy and to actually have an impact.
Yeah. That's a big area of importance, I think, and it's one that I have been focusing a little bit of work on at Harvard now, because there has been, and you guys can correct me because I'm not a research scientist, but at Harvard, they do a lot of work on, they do actually really in-depth work on clean air and the relationship between pollution and public health. But they somehow, I feel, researchers have been taught to maintain this independence from advocating in their mind the use of that information that they're generating to actually do anything with it, which baffles me, because it's not the world I've ever lived in. It's almost contrary to how it seems researchers have been taught. You stay in the lab and you write reports for other scientists. Because I've asked them, who's your audience for this? Oh, other scientists. I'm like, that's great. You can be the smartest people among yourselves, but if you don't tell the rest of us what's going on, we have trouble, you know? And so there is work going on now. Yale's done some spectacular work. There's work at MIT, and there will be work, if I can get it done, at Harvard, that basically connects researchers that believe they have policy-relevant information with people who can make that determination and help translate it. I don't want it to be the scientists themselves. You could, but you've got to get the information out. So honestly, I joke about it, but one of the things is you got to tell me what this means in language that I can understand. And when you do, you can readily translate it into law and policy. And we have to have that vehicle. We have maintained a cone of silence around research that has to be broken. And I am dead serious. And while I joke about the language, I mean it. People do not know that science is done by actually hypothesizing something and figure out whether your science is close to your hypothesis. They think you actually have lots of true things you say, facts, instead of only a specific amount of laws of nature, you know, and we have to break through that. So I could actually point it to you, but there are communication offices now working with researchers to actually help them translate science in a way that it's digestible to policymakers, and even, you know, supporting them when they give testimony and other things. I think is absolutely essential.
Thank you.
But thank you. Because when it does leak, when the research does leak out and people figure it out, it's like, why didn't you tell me that before, right? Yes.
Hi, my name is Chris.
This is a much more active side, I just want you to know.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a freshman at Princeton, and I really want to get into environmental policy when I actually leave college. But first of all, big fan, I love your work. And so as a future EPA administrator to a former EPA administrator,
Do you have a specific year in mind? I'll be watching out.
yeah, I'm 18 now, so in like 30 years. But
Okay.
So
Wow.
you spoke a lot about grassroots campaigns, and I understand that not everyone can be the president or a governor or a mayor or whoever to lead those bigger campaigns, but what can all the students here, all the private citizens here do to contribute to these grassroots campaigns that will ultimately benefit our environments?
Well, there are a lot of people, and thank you for the thank yous.
I appreciate it. And I wish you luck. I think it's a stiff competition to become administrator, which is why I never ran for it. I never even thought about it. But I hope you do really continue to pursue it, because it's a really cool job. Not easy, but it's really cool. There are a number of groups that are starting up. I'll tell you, one of the most effective groups that I've worked with is mums groups. There's groups that have popped up around climate and around clean air that basically they're running a campaign. They do house parties with other mums, and they bring their kids play together. It is a non-confrontational way of discussing what might otherwise be contentious issues, and trying to get people to remember that it's all about kids and public health and our future. And so you need to find constituencies who are willing to get together and work together. And I honestly believe that we still, as much as people think that, you know, Republicans and Democrats can't get along, we do share the same core values. We all care about our kids. So it's essential that you return to those facts first, and then talk about what you do about it. You know what I mean? So I would, and I'd work through the students. I'd work to make the college more efficient and effective. I'd work to see what everybody is investing in and what they're disinvesting in. I'd watch big companies and find out what they do. There's many ways in which you can organize yourself to be active, even if you don't have a whole lot of time. Right. And so I trust you to be as good as you can.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
First of all, to the last student, join the Princeton Student Climate Initiative, because we do tangible things. But also, I wanted to ask you, first of all, thank you so much for your wonderful words. And you spoke about how states and municipalities and businesses are stepping up to the plate. In your opinion, what are the most promising policies that are coming out at the state and local level right now? And where do you see the most progress happening?
Yeah. There are about, it's nearly 400 cities now. I think maybe it's something like 350 mayors that have signed climate pledges to achieve certain levels of reduction. And what is happening now is the infrastructure to account for that and report it is being done. So that when we go to Paris, the United States won't be a blank slate, but you'll be able to document activities going on. And so cities are the best. If you ever actually want to work at something fun, work in a city or a town. Seriously, I worked at the local level for 11 years. You can't get away from people's problems when you work for a city. They're in your friggin' face all the time, right? Really, I used to work in a small town. You couldn't go to the supermarket without someone telling me that the septic system next door was overflowing. I'm like, I'm just trying to buy lettuce here. Leave me alone. So, and that's what mayors feel like. You can't sit in an ivory tower in Washington. It's just so apparent. And climate resilience is one of the best ways to organize people, because there's no argument about, for the most part, that the climate is changing. And you can actually take actions that make a city more beautiful and more livable and cleaner by building green infrastructure and stuff. So there's a lot of ways in which you can roll that out. And so cities are extraordinarily active. They're active under the U.S. Conference of Mayors, as well as individually, and this is all being supported through Bloomberg now. And Bloomberg just put on a whole lot of more millions in this battle that they announced earlier today. So there is an effort going on. For states, it's really interesting. There's a lot of states that are active, but because climate has become such a political word, which is very sad, most of them who are Republicans are doing the right thing. They're just not talking about it. It's just for economic reasons. And so you have a lot of states that are well beyond levels that the Clean Power Plan was asking them to be in 2022. And what actually projections are that with the energy system the way that it is, we're going to far surpass what the Clean Power Plan asked. So they're very active. Now they're unified in terms of developing an accounting system to be able to account for the reductions. And they're all working to exchange information on how they're getting there, so they can work together. So it's really great, and it's all over the country. It's not, the big cities are not just the coasts. Trust me.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes, hi.
Hi. So it's currently the fall, which means for just about all the seniors here at Princeton or college around the country, they have to start thinking about what they're going to do afterwards, and usually thinking about getting jobs. Now, in particular here at Princeton, and I'd say the Ivy League, there's a lot of people who are uncertain about what they'll do, and they end up getting sucked into the financial services sector for its high salaries. Now, what would you say,
That's
I guess,
a shame.
to the college senior today to go into public service, maybe specifically environmental service, as a career for their future?
Well, I mean, everybody comes from a different place and gets excited about different things, but, you know, so I can probably only speak pretty personally about this, but, you know, I've known a lot of people in public service, and what I always tell people is it's not the career path of choice if you want to get rich, but it is a career path if you want a rich life. I have never regretted a minute of public service. You can make a difference in people's lives, and you can see it and feel it and taste it every day. Honestly, it's just it's a miraculous thing. And to me, I am a people person. That's what I do. I love people. I love the ones who disagree with me and the ones that agree with me, because they make you better. And they can change your mind if you listen. And so I think public service is the most noble profession that you will get. And I think if government doesn't deserve to have the very best, I don't know what entity does. It has to be the best and brightest there. And people there are so mission-driven. I think that's one of the biggest concerns that I wake up with every morning, is just that the public servants in Washington are at this point being disrespected. And there's no need of it, because you have a right to have policy shifts. You just don't have a right to deny science and politicize that. That's really all that you need to worry about. And so I worry about them, but it means there'll be job openings for you guys. Go there. Don't just go to Washington. Work for cities and states. Work in government. At least try it. I think you'll find yourself getting hooked, because you'll realize that there's no place where you can be more influential in people's lives than that. Okay?
I'm an old student, a chemical physicist also, and an ex-professor, but you never lose being a student. And while I was a student listening to you, I got hypotheses. There are two things that I just want to mention that I just haven't heard anywhere in the news or anywhere, and that's the problem.
Okay.
Things happen because of forces.
Yes.
Forces make things happen.
Yes.
And I thought of two forces that really have to do with Obamacare, EPA, everything that we're faced with.
Yep.
One force that's not, that unfortunately is almost not there. And another force that's...
Sorry, say that again. What?
One force that unfortunately is very weak today and is needed. And the other force is out of control.
Okay.
The force that is weak is the force of protest for people who know that health is important, that the environment is important, that people suffering, that's important. Racism is important. That voice is quiet. It's very quiet at universities that are sleeping, that are all sleeping, worried they have to get a job, hold on to it. But there used to be protests. Maybe we need protest clubs starting up at Harvard and Princeton and Columbia. But something is needed so that nowadays...
We could show them how to do it, couldn't we?
Nowadays, someone could say, who's going to pay for it? And there's silence. There shouldn't be silence, because that force is absent and is important. The force that's over... Yeah.
No, just the
Well,
second one.
The
What's
second one, and I think this is one that's out of control. I think the wealthy of America know what's going on, and they want to slow up progress, but they know it's coming, and regardless of the cost to human lives in America, they want their money back in taxes. They want to cut health care, to cut EPA, to do all these things. Why? Because they want their tax money back. That's most important, because they want to buy up the future in these starting corporations. And soon
right,
as
let
they
me-
put the
let me try
money
it.
in, then let it go.
Let me try to respond to it, because, I think there's a lot of reasons why we are where we are today, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I actually had a really good time at the Women's March. That was the first time I'd held a sign in ages. Did you go? Did anybody go to the Women's March? Was that not the most fun, pleasant experience for the day after the inauguration? It was great. It was great. And the Science March was awesome. There were some great signs. But anyways, so let me just say one thing, and maybe it's trying to combine the two, is that I don't think that I have felt until I was in Washington the very different viewpoints across the United States, because I had always been on the Eastern Seaboard. And if you travel, people think very differently. Their experience of their life today is very different. And it cannot be dismissed. It's not fake. That is what they feel. There is, when I walk the halls of Congress, I don't have to look at the name on the room to know whether it's a Democratic senator or a Republican senator, because it's either MSNBC or CNN or it's Fox News that I hear, every one of them. That's ridiculous. So there are serious challenges we have to face. And I don't think there's any question that people in power, whether you call them the wealthy or not, always want to stay there. And in some ways, that means they're keeping others out of it, right? And I think in the United States, we always struggle to get the people out of poverty and into the middle class. And we have failed to do that in key ways. And I'm not going to say who's failed, but we have extremes of poverty and wealth now, and that is not healthy for any country. And I am more empathy and interest in figuring out how we turn this back to the United States of America again, because we don't look anything like we used to, and I don't like the way we look today. But I don't think it begins by demonizing anyone. I think it begins by trying to have the empathy to understand why people are where they are. What information are they hearing? How do we get a common level of understanding? I will tell you, I don't know how to do that when you now have situations like Fox and MSNBC. I get frustrated with both of them, because I think you can almost write the script before you hear the news. And I'm tired of it. And so I really worry. I worry about rural areas in this country because I don't know what a rural economic strategy looks like. I know for the first time in polling Harvard's done, they are seeing people literally move from rural areas to urban areas because they are liberals, and backwards the other way because they're conservatives. We are literally so intolerant of one another's views that we are physically moving to get away from the other party. Never happened before. So there is something we need to do to get a grip on things that is reflective of the way that we're reacting. And hate is not what can bind us together. It has to go back to our common virtues and values. That's all I can say. I don't know. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. You're still very underwhelming over this.
My name's Walker. I'm a geosciences major and a senior, and
Say GIS?
geosciences.
Geo, thank you.
And so I grew up in rural Western New York, and it's very red. Everyone has guns and dogs and lots of land and everything like that. But
Dogs?
dogs
define us these days?
As I go
They're
back
not
home,
shooting the dogs, right?
when I go back home and try to discuss things with people,
Yeah.
I find that like facts and statistics have less and less currency.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, even though like I grew up there and I belong there, it's
Yeah.
very difficult to
Yes.
kind of change people's minds when they hear all the rhetoric on the television about, fake news, everything is false, you have to stick to your guns and, believe in what you believe. How do you think we can bridge the gap of like ignoring facts and statistics and coming from like a good place and like being able to reach people in a way that's like, climate change is a thing. We need
I
to
wish
do
I knew that. I have been always, in my entire life, I have been a plain-spoken person. I talk to everybody just like I gave that speech. Everybody. And I think we've lost some of the honesty in our dialogue that we need to have certainly in the people that we vote into power. One of the things that I just want you to think about is I was in Wyoming about 3 weeks ago, and a young person, the same, around probably your age, he came up and asked if there's anybody that I knew who was conservative that he could talk to, because he can't talk to anybody in his college without getting made fun of. That pains me. And so just as you're having difficulty going home, he's having difficulty the exact same way, only opposite. You know what I mean? And I think one of the things that we need to try to do is not convince one another of a solution set, but to return to what shared values we have. If instead of us trying to convince ourselves that our differences are each right, maybe if you started out by saying, what do you care about the most? What do you need to keep functioning and have an agriculture industry in upstate New York function properly? What is it? What do you do? How do we make it work? Because I have yet to hear a rural strategy that I understand in this country today. Everybody's moving to urban areas. Well, everybody I know. And so it's very challenging. And I think until they have a path that can be dictated to them that gets them out of whatever situation they feel is binding them, enforcing them into the positions that they're taking and we're taking, until you can figure out how to get a common ground, you can't talk about differences. I don't know what else to tell you.
We'll take one last question.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and for your service. So in terms of addressing climate change, I feel like there are two main avenues, and I think, so one of them is more personally, what can I do? Take shorter showers, eat less red meat. And then there's the policy side, banning the internal combustion engine. Which do you think is the most important for us to advocate as a school and as a society?
Does it have to be one or the other? I think that, I hate to tell you, but when you go to Princeton, you leave here with an expectation that you're really smart and you know things. So make sure that's true. So I wouldn't limit myself to what I have to do in my own little personal life. But what I do know is that is having worked for people for a long time, there are some things that are absolute truths, I think, and one of them is that nobody engages in something that is meaningless to them. They have to internalize it and personalize it. You need to figure out how to reach people in their own personal way. And so you providing an example works. You talking about the internal combustion engine as being better for somebody's family in their kid's future, they'll care about it.
but you can't just talk about the internal combustion engine. Do you know what I mean? So you got to put it in a context that will engage people and let them know that the things that they value are the things that are at risk and the things that will be better off if you make a change. Until you do that, people will stand still and deny it, or they'll dismiss you, one or the other. So do both, please. You're from Princeton, you can handle it. All right, everybody, thank you so much for having me.